Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Aethereus, Leiden, out January 14th on the Artisan Era. This album has 8 tracks, 55 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. They are an American progressive technical death metal band. Now this is a very substantial record, very hard to digest album all around. When you look at the structure, when you look at the sound, and when you look at the overall atmosphere. One of the great elements about this record is the fluidity that it has. It has a positive impact on how you perceive this album. The sense of continuity from song to song works really well. Having some tracks bleed from one into another really makes this record feel as one continuous piece of art and not necessarily 8 parcels. The quality of the 8 individual songs is there, but the quality that they offer to the collective is definitely a positive, and it's definitely something that stands out when you go through this entire record. What I would like to see different on this album would be the inclusion of some interlude tracks. This is a record that needed something, not to break, not to pause the experience, but to slow it down so that you can appreciate better everything that got you to that point and get ready for what's coming around the corner. Now, they included some bridges on some of the tracks that have those mechanisms, that have that ability to be more methodic, more melancholic, more stripped down, and it worked really well in the individual song constructions, but it didn't have an overall impact in the design of the record. They needed to transfer that from the songs into the overall design, making the album feel a little bit bigger, but also having a lot more playability, being more dynamic, more engaging. Once you move into the soundscape, you have to look at this album from 2 different parameters: the technical progressive on one side and the more traditional death metal on the other. This is not to say that they're walking in separate roads and they never come together, because they do, but they also work in parallel with one another. These songs really morph and grow and move, and the sound moves with it. It doesn't stay stagnant. This is not a linear record sound-wise. What you got in the first song is not what you're going to get necessarily in the second, third, fourth, or fifth. It's an album that's constantly moving, constantly growing, and the sound is taking you in different directions, but always moving you forward. The movement is continuous, the movement is forward, but where you start and where you end up is not necessarily the same points. And that's a very interesting aspect for this record, making the album feel bigger at every single turn, always making it feel like there was a growth process with what's happening from beginning to end. So you're growing with the sound, and the sound is growing with you. Very important aspect, one that they delivered with aces from start to finish on this album. Really good sound, really good quality, really good execution throughout. Now, within the soundscape, there are 3 elements that I feel like I have to mention because they played very important roles in the overall experience, and that is the bass, drums, and guitars. Now, the bass on this album really pops. You could hear it. You could see the impact that it's having. I wanted it a little bit more in the forefront. It is a character in the soundscape, in the experience of the album, but it's not a predominant character. It has more of a secondary role. It's not hidden. It's there. You could hear it. You could feel it. You could see the impact. I wanted a little bit more out of it. I felt like they held it back a little bit, and they could push it more into the forefront, would make the album feel even more alive. It would make the layers of this record be a little bit better defined, a little bit easier to digest, and a little bit easier to comprehend, having a positive impact in the way the songs are put together, and then having a positive impact in how you experience the overall record. The drums are phenomenal and consistent. That was one of the most important elements for me throughout this entire experience of listening to this record, is how the drums sounded, how good they felt to me. They really felt like they were a heartbeat of this album. They had soul, they had impact, they had oomph. They expanded the footprint of each and every single track. They made the album feel bigger, but not necessarily always relying on heaviness in order to create that volume. Sometimes the depth of the experience is what created the volume, is what created heaviness within itself. So I really like the overall approach. I like the consistency of the approach, and it didn't make the album feel repetitive at any single turn, because the drums always added a little bit of spice, a little bit of movement that made the overall record always grow, always morph, and always be together at the same time. The guitars, same could be said for them, because they had so much life in them, and they really dictated the direction in which this album goes, and the direction in which the listener follows its experience. The technical and progressive side on this album really jumps. How well it's put together, how well those 2 worlds are defined, and then how well they are incorporated with one another on one hand, and then you have the more traditional death metal on the other. And bringing all of these pieces together is not always easy, but I felt like they did a wonderful job allowing all of those different sides having a piece of the pie as far as each and every single song are concerned, and then obviously having a positive impact in the overall design of the record. Some of the more stripped down moments were really important. The solos always had a positive impact in the experience of the tracks, not just expanding the songs, but giving them a little bit more life and making them feel a little bit more complete, making the overall experience of this record be one that allows the listener to really gravitate to the guitars, stay connected with what's happening there, and allowing them to be your conductor for what the rest of the record is going to be all about. Now, as far as vocals are concerned, the dynamic approach on the vocals was really interesting to me, because I was thinking going in that this album was going to have more of a consistent style, a one-size-fits-all from beginning all the way to the end. Considering how dynamic the guitars are, you normally need to squeeze them in between two parallels that have a little bit more of a sense of balance. On one hand, you had the drums, and on the other hand, I thought the vocals would be doing that. It was not the case. The vocals really feel like they had a wide palette to pick elements from, and that gave a lot of life to this record. I actually felt like the vocals played a very important role in expanding the overall perception of the album, making the record feel more dynamic, bringing the lyrics a little bit more into the forefront. When you talk about progressive technical death metal records, you tend to gravitate more towards what the bass guitars are doing, and the vocals and the lyrical content are not necessarily what really brings you in. I mean, it brings you in terms of how they connect with the other elements, but they're not necessarily a focus of the attention. On this record, I felt like they took a different approach. The way the vocals come across have a very strong and positive impact on what the lyrical content is all about within those songs. So they help define the essence of the tracks, they help define the atmosphere that the tracks have, and actually put a little bit of a spotlight, a little bit of a focus on the lyrical content, not just the sound that's created around it. And from that perspective, I really enjoyed how they approach this album. For a second record, I must say that this album really builds up on what they delivered previously. So it's a record that offers growth, that offers a path, and you can really see them defining themselves better and defining their sound and their presence a lot better from one album to the other. So it's a record that offers a lot of positives versus very few negatives. If you're a fan of the genre, this is an album that's going to have a lot to offer. It's very layered, there's a lot of things for you to break down, there's a lot of different elements, and it's one of those records that you could really sit down, appreciate, lose yourself in it, and sometimes find it very hard to walk out of it because it's just so dense. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Aberration. This is the opening track, and a great opening, not just for the album itself, but for the song, the way it's constructed. It has a little bit of an intro part of the track, so it opens up the song well, and it opens up the album even better. The blend of heaviness and technical really weave between one and the other. They become together as one, they break apart, they come back again together, and this makes the album and this opening song feel very dynamic, something that you're going to see throughout the entire record. The vocals are equally as dynamic, and that makes these two streams of movement break apart and come together a little bit better, because you have everything moving always in the same direction and falling up and expanding and contracting at the same time. Really nice movement. There's a melancholic bridge within this track that expands the track but makes the track feel a little bit easier to understand, a little bit better for the listener to process what it's happening, and then it allows it to walk away from that and feel even stronger because it merges into a guitar solo. From that solo you start to feel the song growing, and then it's a song that finishes off the same way that it started, so there's a sense of going full circle. There's a little bit of everything in this opening track, a little bit of everything that you're going to experience throughout the entire record in one single song. I couldn't think of a better track to opening up the album than this one, due to its characteristics, due to its soundscape, and the way that it's structured. Next you have Endless Cycle of Rebirth. And this is a very interesting track because this is the second song on the album. So the previous track kind of dies out in a very melancholic, melodic way, same way as it started. And then this one starts off with intensity right from the get-go. It's almost like as you're falling asleep, this song gives you the jolt that you need to wake up and re-engage yourself with the record. Musically and vocally, super dynamic track, volatile at times, not offering a single path for the listener. This is a song that has multiple paths, and not one is better than the other. It really comes down to the listener and which way you approach this track and how much you're going to get out of it. So it's a song that's going to feel and perhaps even have a different experience depending on where you're coming from and how you approach it. It has different ways of coming together. The bass lines on this track are outstanding. They really pop out, but they also go away. They come in almost like waves. They come in and out of the track, but every time you feel the bass coming across, it really adds an incredible shape to how this song is constructed. It adds a lot of life. It makes the overall sound feel a little bit thicker, a little bit bigger, and then when you add the chunkiness of the guitars, it really creates volume without necessarily having to make the song super heavy, super brutal. I mean, it's still a heavy track, but it has depth, and the depth that the bass gives and the power that gets added on by the guitars really makes this song feel big and feel powerful from start all the way to the finish. There's a piano on this song that brings the track to an end. I thought that was really strange and really different, because at no point in time throughout the song do you hear that piano, or there's a sense that there's going to be a little bit of keys or orchestrations being added to this track. So ending on that note was an interesting end to a song that never really gave you any glimpse that that was going to happen. So it acted a little bit like a surprise, but it worked really well in terms of the definition of the track itself. Last but not least, the Living Abyss. The opening keys on this song is really interesting because it's an element that opens up the track but stays with the track. The overall orchestration, the overall symphonic elements that are present at the beginning really become one of the layers and one of the defining elements in terms of what this song is going to offer. Musically and vocally, this track feels to me that it's more about the story that it's telling. It's more about how you navigate through it, how the lyrics come into the forefront, and then the sound and everything else just becomes the backdrop of that story that's being told. Even the way the vocals come across, I just feel like this is a track that has a much different atmosphere, a much different DNA from any other song on this album. A lot of the tracks on this record, you move towards the sound and then you come towards the lyrics and to the vocals. This track to me felt the other way around. I gravitated towards the lyrics and the vocals, and then the sound kind of made it everything come together a little bit better. So a song that has a different approach, different design, and therefore different execution, and sounds completely different from everything else that you're gonna get on this record. This is it, Aethereus with Leiden, out January 14th on the Artisan Era. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.